Derek Carter leaned back on his porch, sipping iced tea and watching the sun dip low over Willow Creek Estates. After years of renting, he'd finally bought a home. 3 bedrooms, fresh siding, and a perfectly normal mailbox perched at the curb, same style as the neighbors. Life was finally quiet, until it wasn single quotes T. 3 days after moving in. A letter arrived in his mailbox. Notice of non-compliance, it read in heavy, formal font. It accused him of violating HOA regulations due to non-conforming mailbox structure and color. Attached was a fine, $100. Due immediately, daily. Derek blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake. His mailbox was beige aluminum, identical to the ones that lined the street. He walked down the block, snapping photos. 10, maybe 12 other houses had the exact same mailbox. Nothing custom, nothing gaudy, all uniform. Still, the next morning, another letter. The fine had been updated. Second notice, $200 due. He tried calling the HOA office, but no one answered. Just a voicemail that looped endlessly. Please direct complaints to the HOA board via written letter. Thank you for keeping Willow Creek beautiful. Frustrated, he printed the photos and wrote a polite but firm letter to the HOA president, Marla Kessler. He mailed it and slipped a copy under the door of the HOA office. Located in a small brick building near the community pool. 3 days passed. Then came another letter. Third violation. $300 due. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Derek's jaw clenched. This wasn't just absurd, it felt personal. But why? The next day, he attended the neighborhood welcome brunch, hosted by the HOA. He approached Marla Kessler, a sharp-faced woman in pearls and pink lipstick, who greeted everyone like she was running for office. When he mentioned the fine, her face stiffened. "Oh, that," she said, her voice sweet but mechanical. "Unfortunately, your mailbox doesn't meet updated standards. We're striving for a more unified aesthetic. You'll need to install one of the new models." But the new rules weren't in the purchase documents, Derek said, and half the street has the same box. Marla shrugged. Those residents have already received warning letters. We'll get to them. Derek knew a lie when he heard. 1. Back at home, he searched the HOA's online portal for updated mailbox regulations. The section hadn't been modified in years. No mention of new models. Nothing about aesthetic upgrades. Still, the fines kept stacking by the end of the second week. Derek owed $1,400 over a beige mailbox that came with the property. That night, he stood at his curb, staring at the box like it held secrets. As he turned to walk back inside, he noticed something strange. 2 blocks over, at the edge of the neighborhood, were 3 mailboxes shaped like little red barns. Bright, ugly, definitely not beige, yet no fine notices sat inside them. Something wasn't right, and Derek was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. The next morning, Derek was already outside before the sun had risen, notebook in hand. He wasn't just a homeowner anymore, he was a man on a mission. The red barn-shaped mailboxes from the night before weren't a figment of his imagination. He counted 3, then 4 more across the neighborhood. Every single one of them far more unusual than his plain beige box. He took photos from the sidewalk, nothing invasive. Just enough to log evidence, no fine slips. No notices taped on them. All of them pristine and untouched. Meanwhile, his own mailbox, which still stood as the most generic piece of curbside hardware ever made, now carried a bold red sticker slapped on its side. Final warning. Enforcement imminent. It wasn't just absurd, it was escalating. He decided to visit the HOA office in person. The office sat tucked between the pool and tennis courts, behind a row of hedges trimmed to military precision. Inside, it was cold and silent, save for the gentle hum of a desktop computer. A woman in her 60s sat behind the reception desk, typing slowly. Her name tag read, Gail. "I'm here about my mailbox fines," Derek said. "I'd like to speak with Marla Kessler." Gail smiled politely, but there was a twitch in her left eye. "Mrs. Kessler isn't available right now. She doesn't usually meet with residents directly unless scheduled in advance. I've sent 2 letters and left 3 voicemails," Derek said. "I think that's enough advance notice." Her smile faded slightly. "All concerns should be submitted in writing." "I've already done that too." She reached under the desk and handed him a packet of HOA rules printed on faded blue paper. "This is the most current document," she said. "Please refer to page 12 for exterior compliance codes." Derek opened to page 12 right there. He scanned every line. There was no mention of mailboxes. No color chart. No specification at all. Is this the only version of the rules? He asked. Gail hesitated, her fingers tapping an anxious rhythm on the desk. That's the version posted publicly. But internal amendments? Derek interrupted. Without a neighborhood vote. Gail caught herself, biting her lip. I don't handle board decisions. I just file the paperwork. That was enough for now. Derek didn't need to push her further, not yet. He knew what she'd just let slip was more valuable than anything Marla would have willingly admitted. As he stepped out of the office, he spotted a man power washing the tennis court, someone he'd seen before. A tall, wiry guy with dark gloves and a crooked ball cap. Derek walked over. Hey, you work for the HOA? He asked. The man shook his head. Nah, I'm freelance. They call me in every few weeks. Sprinklers, trash pickup, paint, whatever Marla needs. You get paid through the HOA fund. He shrugged. I guess. All I know is the check comes from some company, Silver Palm Design or something like that. Weird name for landscaping. Derek froze. Silver Palm. That name had never come up in his HOA paperwork or the community contractor list the realtor had shown him. He thanked the worker and left. Mind racing. It didn't add up. If Silver Palm was being paid with HOA funds, why wasn't it listed in the records? Why had Marla approved mailbox rules that didn't exist? The mailbox fine was no longer just about aesthetics. It was the tip of something far more intentional. Possibly something criminal. As Derek drove home, his eyes scanned the neighborhood. The perfection of Willow Creek manicured lawns, identical shutters, cookie-cutter harmony. It all looked different now. Too perfect, too controlled. And that's when he realized something chilling. He wasn't just being fined, he was being tested. Derek didn't sleep that night. He sat in his kitchen surrounded by notes, photos, and copies of everything he'd collected so far: mailbox notices, HOA rulebooks, and a list of houses with odd mailboxes that had never been fined. His wall looked like something out of a detective movie, complete with pushpins and red string. But there was a pattern. The Red Barn mailboxes. They were all owned by longtime residents. People who'd been in Willow Creek for 5 years or more. A few were even rumored to be close to Marla Kessler herself. That fact alone made Derek's violation feel more like a targeted strike than a fair rule. But it was the name, Silver Palm Design, that refused to leave his head. He grabbed his laptop and began searching for any public record of the company. Nothing came up. No website, no photos, no customer reviews. Just a sparse business registration listing. Silver Palm Design LLC, registered under a local P.O. box. No business phone, no physical address. That wasn't just was deliberately invisible. Digging deeper, Derek found a way into the county's public records portal. It took some time, but he eventually pulled up the HOA's annual disclosures, required by law. The reports were light on detail but included budget summaries. Line item after line item looked mundane: landscaping, trash service, tennis court, repairs. But one stood out: land aesthetic enhancements, $42,600. That was a massive amount, and the pay, Silver Palm Design. Derek leaned back in his chair, stunned. There it was, over $40,000 in HOA dues, going to a company that essentially didn't exist. The mailbox fine, he realized, might just be smoke to cover for something worse, embezzlement, but he needed a second opinion. The next morning, he visited his neighbor across the street, Mr. Helverson. The retired IRS auditor was the quiet type, kept to himself, but Derek had a feeling he'd know how to read between the lines. He laid out the documents, the inconsistencies, and the phantom company. Halverson didn't say a word for several minutes. His glasses slid down his nose as he scanned the numbers with razor-sharp focus. This is bad, Halverson finally muttered. You're not imagining it, Derek. These aren't just bookkeeping errors. This is fraud. He pointed at a notation on the HOA's annual report. See that? The date this Silver Palm payment was made. That's during the same month Marla updated the mailbox guidelines, except she didn't follow legal procedure. There's no member vote recorded, no amendment notice, no paper trail. That makes the rule and your fine invalid. Derek's heart pounded. So they're fining me based on rules that don't legally exist, and siphoning money into a ghost company. Halverson nodded grimly. That's what it looks like. But why target me? Because you're new. They probably thought you'd just pay up and stay quiet. That mailbox fine is a warning shot. Derek sat back, exhaling slowly. He wasn't just up against a petty HOA board. He was up against a system designed to silence and extract. He looked out the window at his house across the street, his home. His mailbox. No, he wasn't backing down. Halverson stood. I'll help you dig deeper. But if you're serious about this, you'll need more than evidence. You'll need support, neighbors, witnesses, and maybe even a lawyer. Derek nodded. Then let's get to work. Derek had never considered himself the confrontational type. But after uncovering the HOA's secret payments to a shell company, that mailbox fine felt more like an opening move in a long, calculated game. With Halverson's help, he spent the next few days digging through archived HOA newsletters, meeting minutes, and city filings. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became. Marla Kessler had been manipulating the board for years. Meetings were held without proper homeowner notification. Voting procedures were skipped entirely. And Silver Palm Design. It had received payments nearly every quarter since she became HOA president. Halverson compiled everything into a thick folder and began drafting a formal complaint for the state's HOA regulatory board. Derek, meanwhile, started quietly reaching out to neighbors, ones who'd complained about small fines, weird violations, or sudden rule changes. Most of them were hesitant, but some agreed to meet privately, behind closed doors, where no eyes could see. They weren't alone anymore. By the end of the week, Derek had a growing group of skeptical homeowners willing to talk. The momentum was building. But so was the pressure. It started with subtle things. His trash bin mysteriously disappeared one morning. Later that day, he received an email from the HOA citing improper trash storage. Then came a letter stating his grass was non-compliant with community color standards. It was green, like every other lawn on the street. Then came the night visit. It was just past 11 p.m. Derek had finished backing up his files onto a USB drive and was locking up when he saw something odd from the corner of his Aja silhouette, moving along the hedges outside his front window. He killed the lights and crouched behind the curtain. There were two figures, one holding what looked like a flashlight, the other holding a clipboard. They weren't wearing uniforms, but their behavior was deliberate. They lingered at his mailbox, peering at it, measuring it. Derek quietly grabbed his phone and started recording. The figures moved toward his driveway, snapping photos of his garage door, fence line, and side yard. One of them even bent down to peer under his truck, and then, one of them looked directly at the window where Derek crouched. The flashlight flicked off. They hurried back to a black SUV parked without lights, at the corner, climbed in, and drove off. Derek's hands were trembling. That wasn't a routine inspection. It was a message. The next morning, a letter appeared on his doorstep and marked. Inside was a single printed sentence. You're making a big mistake. No name, no logo, no return address. He took the note straight to Halverson. They know, we're onto something, Halverson said. That wasn't random. That was them watching you. You think it's Marla, either her, or someone on the board trying to protect her. And now that you're organizing the neighborhood. Derek realized just how serious this had become. He wasn't just uncovering financial misconduct. He was threatening the illusion of power the HOA had been operating under for years. I think it's time we get someone with legal teeth, Derek said. Someone who knows how to fight this publicly. Halverson nodded. I know just the person. Derek had faced unfair fees, surveillance, and silent threats, but now, it was time to fight fire with fire. That meant bringing in someone who knew how to challenge HOA overreach and win. Halverson made the call. 3 days later, a silver Lexus pulled into Derek's driveway. Out stepped a woman in a slate gray blazer, briefcase in one hand, confidence in the other. Her name was Claire Armand, a real estate attorney known for dismantling abusive HOA boards across the state. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I reviewed the files Halverson sent me, she said, walking briskly into Derek's kitchen. What you have isn't just suspicious, it's damning. Unauthorized fines, fake contractor payments, and rule amendments without proper process. If even half of this is true, your HOA is in serious legal jeopardy. Derek passed her the USB drive with video of the late-night visitors. Claire watched in silence, then looked up. They're trying to intimidate you. Good, that means they're scared. That same day, Claire drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to the Willow Creek HOA board, naming Marla Kessler personally. It demanded an immediate stop to all fines, an explanation of mailbox regulation enforcement, and full disclosure of all Silver Palm Design financial transactions under threat of legal action and state regulatory involvement. Within 24 hours, the HOA posted a vague notice canceling all pending fines for mailbox-related matters under internal review. Derek received no apology, just silence. But things didn't calm down. They got worse. That Friday, Derek came home to find his backyard gate hanging off its hinges. His irrigation system had been mysteriously ripped from the ground. Nothing's destruction. Deliberate, invasive, personal. He called the police. But with no witnesses and no cameras, they simply wrote it up as possible vandalism. No arrests, no leads. But Derek knew better. Claire wasn't surprised. It's the typical pattern. When HOA boards get exposed, they scramble. They don't play fair because they never had to before. That changes now. Together, they began assembling a dossier to file with the state HOA compliance board. Halverson cross-referenced bank records, identifying over $120,000 in payments to Silver Palm Design over 3 years, none of which had traceable work orders or verified services rendered. Claire traced the business registry further. Silver Palm Design wasn't just tied to a P.O. box. P.O. box was leased under Marla's husband's name, cleverly concealed behind a small holding company. A classic shell setup. They were ready to file, but before they could submit, a new development dropped into Derek's mailbox, this time from the HOA summons. The board was accusing Derek of acts of hostility against HOA staff, claiming his neighborhood outreach and online posting had created an unsafe environment. They were calling for a closed-door disciplinary hearing again. Without legal backing, Claire was furious. "This is pure retaliation," she said. "They're trying to bully you into silence before this goes public. But guess what? They just handed us proof of intimidation." Derek looked around his living room, now littered with paperwork, statements, and photos. A war zone. And yet, this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every homeowner who'd been forced to pay up. And shut up. Let them hold their meeting, he said. "I'm done hiding." Claire grinned. "Then it's time to go public." The HOA scheduled Derek's disciplinary hearing for 6 p.m. sharp, at the discretion of the board, and closed to non-parties, according to the formal notice. Claire laughed when she read it. "They think this is still their game," she said. "Time to flip the board." Rather than show up quietly, Claire helped Derek organize something else, a neighborhood information session, using social media groups and old-fashioned flyers. They invited residents to gather 2 hours before the hearing, not in secret, but at the community clubhouse. The flyer read, "Are you paying too much? Find out where your HOA dues are really going." By 4 p.m., nearly 30 homeowners had gathered. Some came cautiously, clutching past fine letters. Others came angry, with stories of mysteriously increasing dues or unexplained citations for things as trivial as leaving a garden hose out. Overnight, Claire took the floor and laid it out plainly. "This isn't about a mailbox," she said. "This is about a board abusing its authority, creating fake rules, and funneling your money into a fraudulent company." She handed out copies of documents, bank payments, contractor filings, photos, and highlighted rules that had never been properly voted on. Gasps filled the room. One woman, Mrs. Delaney, raised a trembling hand. "I was fined $500 last year for repainting my shutters with a color the HOA told me was approved." Then Marla said she had no record of that approval. Another man nodded. "I had to remove a tree I planted 2 years ago. They said it violated the new shade uniformity rule. I didn't know we had one." Claire took their stories, gathered signatures, and added them to the growing complaint. Then came 6 o'clock. Derek and Claire walked into the HOA hearing with Halverson and 5 other homeowners who refused to stay silent. Marla sat at the head of the table with 2 board members flanking her, looking annoyed and increasingly nervous. "We appreciate your attendance," Marla began, but Claire interrupted immediately. "This hearing is invalid," she said, placing a thick folder on the table. "You are operating under a non-binding rule structure with no legal quorum, and your mailbox fines are fraudulent. Furthermore, your payment history shows criminal conflict of interest through Silver Palm Design." The room froze. Lips parted, but nothing came out. Claire pulled out one last document, a formal notice of legal intent to file with the state HOA compliance board. Signed and time-stamped, copies had already been delivered electronically. And just for good measure, She handed out copies of the HOA's Articles of Incorporation, showing the board had failed to file its annual renewal 2 years ago. In short, Claire said coolly, "You're not just in violation, you've been operating illegally for 24 months. The color drained from Marla's face. One board member stood abruptly. "I didn't know about any of this. I was told everything was in order." Claire turned to the others. "You have a choice. Either you cooperate now, step down, and allow a full review, or we escalate this legally." The silence was long, then like dominoes, both board members pushed back their chairs and walked out. Only Marla remained. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said coldly. "You're breaking this neighborhood apart." "No," Derek said. "We're finally putting it back together." That night, Claire submitted the formal complaint with over 30 resident signatures. The video, the records, the bank filings, they were all in the hands of the state board now. But just when Derek thought the storm had passed, he got a call from a neighbor at 2 a.m. "Derek," the voice whispered, panicked, "you need to see this. Meet me outside." Now, he threw on a hoodie and rushed outside. What he saw made his blood run cold. His mailbox was gone, and in its place stood a bright red barn-shaped box, bolted into the ground. Derek stared at the mailbox bolted into the ground in front of his property. It was the same ridiculous barn-shaped design he'd photographed on other lawns, the exact type the HOA had never found. Only now, it wasn't funny. It was a message. Someone had ripped out his original mailbox in the dead of night and replaced it with this one. Not only was it a violation of federal property tampering laws, it was a bold, childish insult. Worse, it was bolted into concrete professionally. Someone had planned this, paid for it, measured and installed it. This wasn't a prank, it was a warning. Back off. Or else. Claire arrived 20 minutes later, flashlight in hand. Halverson wasn't far behind, jaw clenched in fury. "This is criminal trespass," he said. "They've gone from shady to felonious." Claire examined the bolts. "This was done with HOA funds. Guaranteed." "Should we call the police again?" Derek asked, though he already knew the answer. Claire shook her head. "Without camera footage or direct witnesses, they'll call it vandalism and move on, but this works in our favor. The HOA's desperation is painting them into a corner." She wasn't wrong. The next morning, Derek filed a formal complaint with the local postmaster. Mailbox tampering was a federal offense. The postmaster promised to escalate it, but before Derek could finish his coffee, he got a text from Mrs. Delaney, the woman who'd spoken up during the clubhouse meeting. "You need to come to the community office, right now. Bring Claire, Derek," and Claire rushed over. Inside, the small HOA office looked ransacked, but not from violence, from panic. Boxers were missing. Filing cabinets open. The desk drawers had been emptied. Even the printer paper was gone. Only Gail, the elderly receptionist, remained, her hands trembling as she clutched a thumb drive. "I tried to stop her," she said quietly, "but Marla came in early this morning. Cleared out everything. Said she was resigning due to stress." Claire stepped forward. "Did she say where she was going?" Gail shook her head, "but she left in a hurry. Her car was packed." Then she extended the thumb drive toward Derek. "I made a backup," she said. "I've been watching for months. I didn't know how to stop her, until you came along." Claire took the drive, nodding solemnly. "You did the right thing." Later, that evening, Derek, Halverson and Claire plugged the drive into a laptop. What they found made everything else pale in comparison. Marla hadn't just been embezzling funds through Silver Palm Design. She'd created 3 additional shell companies, all registered to different post office boxes. Each had built the HOA for various beautification services, all with inflated or fake invoices, tree trimming that was never done, pond cleanings for a pond that hadn't existed in years, and surveillance systems that were just broken, decoys. But one document hit harder than all the rest. A signed application to the county zoning board dated 2 years earlier. It was a proposal to dissolve the HOA's legal standing and convert Willow Creek into a private investment property. The plan: slowly drive out non-compliant homeowners through constant fines. Then sell the homes under a real estate trust, one owned by Marla's husband. Derek stood speechless. "This was never about a mailbox," Claire muttered. "It was about ownership. She wanted this neighborhood. Every inch of it. And she nearly got away with it." The next morning, Claire submitted the final documents to the state regulators and mailed copies to the county DA's office. By evening, Marla's name was all Over local news, HOA president under investigation for fraud and abuse of authority. Derek stood in front of his house that night, arms crossed, staring at the red barn-shaped mailbox. It no longer felt like a threat, it felt like a trophy, but the story wasn't quite over. Because the final audit came back the next morning, it revealed something no one had expected. The sun was rising over Willow Creek when Claire's phone buzzed. It was the county clerk's office. The results of the official audit were in. Derek Halverson and Claire sat together at Derek's kitchen table as the report loaded on Claire's laptop. At the top of the document was a line neither of them expected. Willow Creek Estates HOA, registration status expired, entity lapsed, no legal standing. Claire stared at it, blinking. This can't be right. But it was. The report laid it out clearly. 3 years ago, the Willow Creek Estates HOA had failed to file its annual corporate renewal with the state. Without it, the HOA lost all legal standing to operate as a corporate entity. No authority, no enforcement power, no ability to collect dues, issue fines, or enforce rules. In other words, every action the HOA had taken for the past 3 years, notice, every violation, every dollar collected had been illegal. Derek leaned back, stunned. You mean this whole time? They weren't even a real HOA. Claire nodded slowly. They were a ghost board, pretending to be in power. Everything Marla did, every mailbox, fine, every surveillance threat, every dollar funneled through her fake companies was under the name of an organization that didn't legally exist. Halverson grinned for the first time in weeks. She wasn't the president of the HOA. She was the president of nothing. The bombshell audit was immediately added to the state complaint and forwarded to the district attorney's office. Within 48 hours, a formal investigation was opened, not just into fraud, but impersonation of a legal entity, misuse of community funds, and possible wire fraud due to interstate financial transfers. But it didn't stop there. Claire organized a town hall this time, with Derek at the front of the room. Over 60 residents packed the clubhouse. Some were angry, others were embarrassed, but all were ready for answers. Derek stepped forward, holding the audit in one hand and a photo of his original beige mailbox in the other. I was fined daily for a mailbox, he said. They told me I was out of compliance, but the truth is, the real violation wasn't mine, it was theirs. Gasps filled the room as Claire detailed how the HOA had been operating illegally, how Silver Palm Design and its sister shell companies had drained over $200,000 in fake services from the community budget, and how all of it had been hidden behind intimidation, fake rules, and the illusion of authority. One neighbor broke into tears. Another shook Derek's hand. People started sharing their own stories, payments they'd made under threat, fines they'd never questioned, repairs they'd done out of fear. It wasn't just a reckoning, it was a revolution. A temporary management committee was formed to replace the now-defunct board. Claire helped advise the legal reconstruction process. The residents voted to either rebuild the HOA lawfully or dissolve it entirely. Many leaned toward the latter. Marla. She was arrested 3 weeks later while attempting to withdraw cash from one of her fake company accounts. Her husband vanished from town. Investigators uncovered years of shady real estate moves, all tied back to the same plan: acquire Willow Creek from the inside out. But Derek stopped it with a mailbox. Weeks later, he finally installed a new one, this time, a sleek black unit with a silver flag. His neighbors had offered to pay for it, but he declined. It's just a mailbox, he said, locking it shut. But sometimes, that's where the fight starts. Call to action, narrator voiceover. Derek took on an entire HOA armed with nothing but facts, courage, and a camera. What started as a petty fine uncovered years of lies and saved a neighborhood from being stolen out from under them.